Welcome to the What Lies Ahead podcast, where I explore everything related to the hardcore scene and community. I'm your host, Chris Ruffini, and I couldn't be more excited to have our guest for today's episode. Joe Hardcore McKay has been a prominent fixture in not only the Philadelphia hardcore scene, but up and down the Northeast for close to 30 years, setting up the biggest shows and festivals as a promoter. His yearly fest, This Is Hardcore, has become a staple in the hardcore community for well over a decade. He also has a podcast called This Is Hardcore that can be accessed across all streaming platforms. In addition, his band Shattered Realm just released their new EP, Scars from Lessons Learned, and have a bunch of shows lined up in the spring. I'd like to welcome Joe Hardcore to the podcast. Thanks for being here, bro. How's it going, man?
Dude, my old friend. I tell everybody, I say, because when I tell the younger guys, I say, back in the day, it was writing letters, it was trading tapes, it was doing stuff. Like I had from you or Anthony, I had a bunch of Relentless split 7-inches and shit. Because well, the young kids, they start digging back into those times, and I'm like, oh, that band played here, this band played here, become one played here, like, and they're like, how do you guys know all that? I'm like, first shows, then you meet people, you see things on the internet. So like when you started the podcast, I'm like, this is the guy we've been friends for almost 30 years now, man.
Years, man. And I think back, I remember specifically working in my uncle's gas station, and I would call you and you'd call back. We'd talk shows, and you got us down to Philadelphia a bunch of times, and
yeah,
you brought your boys up, I think once, right?
Kensington.
You played that show. Yeah, that was Kensington. That was fun. And long time, man. And when I started this podcast, here will be the third episode. You were 100% someone I wanted on here for for all the reasons I mentioned in the intro, but just the history you have and all of the bands and the connections and all that stuff is so interesting in terms of the scene that we have. So to start off with you, even though I know this, but I think for everybody listening here, what led you to hardcore?
The bizarre thing that led me to hardcore is actually today is the 1-year anniversary of my mother passing. It's all good. No, it's all good. Mm. She raised me differently than most people. Like she was a young person, single mother. She eventually got into hair metal, and especially when my dad was out of the picture, it was a rock and roll party house. My mom was bartending. My mom eventually was stripping. Then she was booking metal bands. So you're thinking the mid to late 80s, you got a young girl who's got 2 kids at home, and she's got to go out and get that money. So, I mean, Headbangers Ball was at my house every weekend. My next door neighbor was my aunt and uncle. Their son and his friends would come over, play Dungeons and Dragons. So, like, in 87, when Metallica was really breaking, Master of Puppets was playing in my house, like literally like every day. Like I wasn't raised like a normal human, like I played soccer. I went to school, but I was more excited to see AC/DC, more excited to see Kiss. And then throughout the period of time in our neighborhood, bizarrely enough, even though the hardcore scene in the area had a big venue and a hall that a lot of people did shows, completely oblivious to it because A, I'm fucking 7 years old, but B, no one in my mother's sphere was really into that kind of stuff. And it took until her started getting into college, and at the same time, we were starting to be able to go to South Street in a bigger group. I was one of the younger ones. I was born in 1980, so 88, I'm 7, turning 8. By the time we're going down to South Street, like 1990, 1991, the guys are a little bit older than me. They're in high school. I'm like 10, 11 years old, hanging out with 12, 13, 14 years. We're going down to get out of the neighborhood. And you just get this crazy bit of exposure. I mean, I had gone to big rock shows. Like in 1990, we went to see the Clash of the Titans tour with Slayer and all that stuff. Like, I went to a lot of, I started really going from the metal on TV to the Slayer stuff to, there was a small club called the Cell Block just outside the city we could take the bus to. They had always just like, I seen Suffocation and Obituary, Carcass, like all this older stuff. I had a lot of long hair. I was obsessed with all these bands. And my mother saw the value in us going to these shows instead of being in our neighborhood. And she had a friend from college who made us a tape. She's like, oh, my son's in all this metal stuff. And on it was Crossover Heaven, Crumbsuckers, Agnostic Front. I used to, for a long time, I had this tape. There still is a bucket of tapes, literally like a work bucket of tapes.
Mhm.
I'm still hoping one day I find it again because he hand wrote everything. But like that was like the scripture to help get us to some of these stuff. And then as you start going to South Street, you start the blur on someone's jacket starts getting a little bit more fine. Yeah, you can acknowledge the black flag bars, but then you start noticing the Youth of Today stuff. It was a really good time for that kind of underground stuff, but we're still too young. But all that kind of immersion for us started coming when the wheels, like what they say, like the training wheels came off, and we started doing more going to shows on our own. And intermittently, like the biggest thing for me was going to see Biohazard, Sick of It All, and Sheer Terror at the TLA. I was 12 turning 13 at the time, but everyone was 16, 17. And that was like the portal. I seen Biohazard on Headbangers Ball a ton of the time. Seen the Cro-Mags video, but to be at a real hardcore show, that was it. And then the rest of it just came in time, you know, and it goes back to my mom booking shows. So then eventually, like, you do, like, my mom had band, like, literally band dudes in our house all the time. My mom did, you know how, I mean, not to be, she's dead, so I can say this, like, she's a young hot girl. She's going to get some band guys coming around. So like we had a lot of band guys in the house. It was fucking total chaos. And eventually you're going to want to start a band. So I was in this really terrible band that only a very few people know about. In 2 more years, I'm going to drop the demo and I have all this stuff.
So you still have all the stuff to put it up on Spotify and all that.
No,
stuff.
We're not going to put it on Spotify. I'm going to put it up as like a, hey kid, if you're ever worried about not being cool, this is my first band.
Okay.
But that process got us to play with 25 to Life. It kind of like we were them kind of younger bands that don't really don't. I mean, especially for like at the time, like hardcore was so many different things. Like the kind of hardcore that I would eventually start booking, you know, like that eventually would get called Joe hardcore, like the E-Towns, the 25 to Life. Like it was kind of a diss, like, oh, that's that kind of hardcore. But like, yeah, I also listen to all the old stuff and I love Sick of It All. I love the Agnostic Front. Like I shaved my hair down with my best friend who passed to go to the first Agnostic Front reunion show. My mom bought us tickets to go see it. You know, like I was still very much in the pure hardcore, but it was gone. Still Minor Threat. There's none of that stuff. So like I'm into the classic stuff. And little by little, I was like watching a couple of my friends' book shows. I had a really good tutelage and mentor in Chris Spear, the drummer, Dysphoria, and my buddy Bob, who distroed your stuff. Remember Bob Gut Punch Records?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so Bob was putting on shows, and then we were trying to put on shows. My buddy Mark Fisher from this band Intoxicated, he was putting on local shows. So we kind of all connected. We were doing shows downtown. I wouldn't say we.
Oh, sorry. How old were you at that point? Would you say?
15 turning 16.
15, 6. Wow.
I was 15 turning 16. I was 16 turning 17 when Agnostic Front reunited. And the first show I booked as Joe Hardcore Presents is March 23rd, 1997. So we're about 2 years away from 30 years of me booking shows.
That's insane. Think about that.
It's like,
right?
Yeah, and it just comes, like a video game. I tell people, like, you level up, you know, go to shows. Okay. Yeah. Like, or first maybe buy the records or check the records out, check these bands out, then start going to some shows that might not be quite like the big concerts. And then you start finding the smaller concerts. For us, it was death metal. And then the hardcore shows were even smaller than the death metal shows at times. There were bigger shows, but they were further out, you know? And then because of the access of not having cars and shit, and we weren't really, like, I wasn't really, you see Biohazard, Sick of It All, that doesn't immediately make you like a hardcore kid. It just means you saw them. There was tons of long hairs there, but it changed everything because I'm like, this is the chaos. Like the metal scene was sedate compared to some of this. And then so you got to kind of keep doing these like little iterative circles and like start pinpointing. And it happened that so many guys were older than me by 3, maybe 4 years. They were hanging down. Like we're like from the neighborhoods. You've been there. You see in our neighborhoods, that's where the train and all that is.
Yep.
So we're at the end of that train. We're at the end of that train station. The stop that you were at is only one more stop till it's the end, and it's just buses and trolleys. So we were at the beginning L station in that part of the city. So then you're getting on to go to like a concert. You like when like for instance when like Iron Maiden would come, we would get on at the first stop. By the 4th or 5th car, you see the people rocking Iron Maiden shirts. Like, oh shit, they're going to the show. The same thing started happening for our shows. We'd see people on buses, and we would see he just got off 3 stops from us. And then you're on the way back. You're like, hey, where do you live? And you start connecting that way. And little did we know it, we had friends. And then all of them were like iteratively either in a punk rock or metal and shifting towards the Biohazard, the Sick of It Alls, the stuff that was really rising up from the underground, even to us. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the guys who had the chance to do the bands, all that's it just came organically. And then once the access was there, like we got the exposure. Once we got the access, the next thing for us was, all right, do we just want to be there or do we want to like do shit? And some of the guys already had bands, and then you want to be in a band. Even if you're not good, you want to be in a band because you want to try it. And then for some stupid reason, I just had this thought, like, I could probably do this. I could, and everything. I'm still learning lessons. I'm still making mistakes almost 30 years later. There's still things that I coulda, woulda, shoulda. If I would have only known ahead of time, it's still a process. But I mean, it all just comes down to, you know, just like little by little, like whittling away at it.
Yeah. Like, it's cool with Mom, right? She was, I mean, obviously the music and booking shows. I mean, she was booking shows. So you saw that at a young age, and that you can't help but instill and take that with you, right? In terms of what you did. Where was that interest of, because you were always a go-getter with that. I remember when we would talk back in the day and you're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I have this idea. And it all happened. It wasn't you just talking about it. This stuff, it would actually happen. You would do it. So what was that interest that sparked it, that made you like, I just putting on shows?
The first 25 to Life show was in Philadelphia at a place in what would even for then be like the Hood. Mm-hmm. And it was like 25 to Life came up there. And they were the first time Hatebreed came out and played. And there were more people going to our neighborhood church halls and our small shows than 25 to Life and Hatebreed the first time. And Burnside actually played that show too. There was a band called No One's Hero that played a lot, and a local band, Ubasunt, like collectively together. And then the following summer, All Else Failed and 25 to Life played out in Delaware County at the like, we're on the one end of the train. The final end of the train is 69th Street. Out in 69th Street, we're like, we're going to go to it's a big skating rink. There was still more people in our neighborhood at shows. And my friend Shane from For Life, who was the guy who did shows in that side of town, like that summer he did Madball with Breakdown and Cold Front. And that was a packed show, but some of these shows weren't getting to everybody. So I was like, why don't we just do them in our fucking neighborhood? My mom, you know, like the local Italian guys that had a social club. She would go there and party and drink, and she's like, "Hey, can my son rent this out?" And that's where you played, like the 3 C's club.
I was going to ask, because that
yeah.
Where is that place now? I'm sorry. What is that?
It's in Frankfort.
Is it still around or no?
Yeah, it's a rental hall still. Okay. I took a picture of it. 7 years. Or wait, what is it? I took a picture out front of it for I took a picture of the 20-year because we did a 20-year show. Okay. So I took a picture for that this year. It's now, I think they still just call it like Unity Street Hall. And I was literally thinking about calling them like, hey, can I rent this out? And I was either just going to do a podcast or do something in it. Okay. And just be like 30 years later, we did shows here. But that whole neighborhood, like there were shows in the park right there. Like Mark Fisher from Intoxicated, he had his family were roofers, so they had generators. We'd have outside shows. There's so many guys from the neighborhood that had punk rock bands, and there was already punk rock bands in it because the club that was I said that I lived near, there was already bands. We were just too young to see them, you know, like. But there was a bunch of bands like Tribe 13, Line Cell. There was a hardcore band, Brick House. Sean Money, who is a guy who would eventually play in Everyday Dollars. He's from our neighborhood. I went to high school with his brother. So we ended up taking stuff from New York hardcore, like your bands. I mean, the first time 25 to Life had a really big show in Philadelphia was the hall show that we put on. And I mean, they would eventually later play the Trocadero and shit like that. But like, we brought One for One. We bought a lot of we brought so many bands that were playing the same kind of halls in other parts of the country. because of me going out with Dysphoria, because of us traveling and handwriting letters and connecting with people, we were bringing people down to a neighborhood no one would go to the shows, but there was a built-in audience. Plus, then you got to figure the guys who I would eventually be in punishment with. There was a whole group of guys from Bristol, PA, and they were first Rejected Youth, then they were Scarred for Life. Then me and Mike would do punishment together. There was Life Sick Life. You know, like Life Sick Life played the very first show. Like there's all these guys that had bands. So they were just untapped resources. So you put all these bands in a room. I mean, the guy Dave House, who's famous in Philly for his solo career after all this other bands he was in, he's from the neighborhood I live in the neighborhood next to him now. Everyone reveres Dave House, but like he was a band called Step Ahead that played my first show. You know, like there was tons of bands that couldn't get into the bigger, cooler downtown scene, and we just networked and pulled them all together. And it kind of just worked out because a bunch of young kids from all these different places actually would show up to somewhere to see their friend's band.
Yeah, because I remember even back, I'm going to say late 90s, 97, 98, give or take, and speaking to people in New York and saying, yo, when we get down to Philly, that's where we wanted to go, though.
Yeah.
Was with
that.
Tons
of kids.
Yeah. It was those shows. They were great. So what was your process in because you had that place, but then as it grew and built, in picking the right venue or place for a show? I guess, is it more of, okay, I have a bunch of bands that are coming through, big bands, and you had certain places you go? What was your process in terms of looking into that and connecting with some of these venues?
So some of them are pre-existing things that we just had to go and say, hey, I want to do. So from like 97 to 1998, anywhere under that L that had a hall, I went door to door and knocked on. You know, like we did shows there's actually funny, there's a place now that's getting renovated to come back. It's like a DIY spot in the neighborhood. They do shows at the park. In that circle is where I did 5 separate other halls and a small club that did shows. And because of the amount of people that would live in the neighborhoods, those halls were open to it. And then iteratively, like you can see it on the videos for the Bad Luck 13. Like we had Bad Luck 13 at one venue. Well, that guy didn't want to pay. He was trying to rip us off, so all his windows got broke out. Then we did a crazy show a year later, 4 blocks from where we just smashed that out. And we do Bad Luck 13, 25 to Life, Art War, Death Threats first time in PA, the first Clubber Lang show with John singing in a smaller room, and we packed it out, and there was a ceiling fan thrown, and fire was literally blown into place. Cops came afterwards. Like those kind of things would happen, but we would always find other spots because I was constantly trying to do the next thing. And downtown hardcore was different. That's the other weird fucked up thing. Like 25 to Life, they eventually got to play down there. The Hate Breeds, the stuff like that would play down there. But the bands that were coming up in that thing, it was harder to get them on the Trocadero bills. It was hard to get them on the TLA bills, you know, and some of the smaller clubs that were available weren't all ages. So like we also had, like, before the time when we're doing real hardcore shows, there were churches that used to do school dances, like Friday night, $2, and you just couldn't grab the girl by the butt. They couldn't touch you by the butt. But we would go there because that's the only way we're going to get near girls. It sounds like we're from the 50s, but it's literally that's literally how we're meeting girls, is we're going to school dances. And because I went to so many of them, because I lived on the hood side of town. There's not really the kind of girls that are going to date me there. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go up there and try to date them. So we would go in a big pack and we would go to these churches. But all the pastors, they're not Catholic, but they were like, hey, we want the kids safe on the weekends. So the guys like 4 years older than me were already in bands that were covering like Nirvana and shit. Okay. So like you get a flyer and you're like, oh, that's a place maybe we could do shows at. To the point where like Buried Alive played in Philly the first time at a church where we had school dances at. You know, like
that's awesome.
You know? And all that, and I got Buried Alive because I was writing Scott Vogel from when I bought a record from Despair, and I was like, I want to book your band, and I would constantly write everybody, and then like it sounds so like antiquated, like you had to wait for a letter, then you had to write another letter, like eventually, like that's how it was, right? Because of those things like the dialers, I used to call Nick B from Cold Front. The one band, I still, there's one of my favorite Queens bands from that era, and like I have everything.
They were good. Yeah.
Dude, tape, split 7-inch LP. Like if it's something Cold Front did, I had it. But Nick would put me on to other bands. Maybe check these guys. Why don't you know about Still Shoot? Like, God bless him for like humoring me, punishing him on the telephone and calling him. But that turned into a bunch of people I would talk to. And, like talk to Anthony Rage, you talk to guys from like Jay Reason from Connecticut, and everybody was throwing ideas out. So we're always trying to help somebody else out, like,
right.
And because I wasn't in a band, it was easy. Hey, what about Kensington? Hey, did you ever hear this band up here? What about Burnside? Like I didn't have a name for myself to throw out, and then centrifugal circles again, we go from Philly and New Jersey to Philly and New York, Philly, Long Island, Philly. We go up to Connecticut. Then you Dysphoria takes you up to Brockton. You meet all the Brockton guys. Then you're going out to Detroit. Then you're hitting Erie. You're hitting Harrisburg. You're hitting all these places. You're going down to the Phantasmagoria in near West Virginia and the top of Maryland. You're going to Baltimore. You're going to North Carolina. This was like something that was a passion just to see new shit. It's like discovering new worlds. So like, and again, I wasn't an adult. I had some responsibility, but not enough to be like, oh, I can't get up and do that tomorrow. Like, it was fucking fabulous. And it was a great escape.
You would come out to Long Island and you'd come to shows.
All the time. I
so
love it.
Even if like those bands you were saying that you got shows were even playing. I actually remember that. I would see some Long Island shows, city shows.
Yeah, I just like being at, and again, not to knock Philadelphia, there was just so much going on all at once. And the Pulse of Philadelphia's hardcore scene was good when it was great, but they had a vibe, I would say, by our standards, was like, we're the cool guys. You got to earn it up. And we were like, we're cool with Bad Luck 13, motherfucker. Like those are the true old guys. And what's fucked up is a lot of the guys from that era, there's very few of them that come hang out. Besides, literally just did Sheer Terror and Bad Luck together in a bar those guys own. And it was crazy. But like a lot of the guys who like kind of, I hate to use the term gatekeep, sounds soft, but those guys kind of be like, you didn't earn it yet. It's like, you guys left before we did. We're still here, and the Bad Luck guys who were there before you are still here. We really had a good connection, but there the stream of bands that really caught our attention because VOD played 2 or 3 smaller shows in the area, and then they got giant. So you'd see them at the Trocadero. But like there was just a lot of stuff going on that just wasn't exactly Philadelphia centric because no one was thinking about bringing them down. I mean, VOD and 4 Punch at the Church is still one of the craziest Philly shows. Mm-hmm. So they did get that. But like, until later, Philadelphia didn't have Inca Dagger was like the band. That was like you knew to go to Inca Dagger, not only because Sean and them were just incredible. It was a different, every set, you don't know what's going to happen. Like there were events more than this is another set, So traveling to see a lot of the stuff was also just interesting because I got obsessed with the dancing stuff too. Like Philly didn't dance like that, and then we're going to New Jersey, then we're going to like the Pipeline, then we're going to New York, then we're going to Middlesex County. Like we really liked. I say this like it's a Footloose, but it's like we really like dancing, like really like going to the show and going off, like going to CC's, going out to Connecticut. They always do like the clap ahead of time and stuff. Like what's up with this clapping? What are we doing here?
Well, I remember when we played Philly the first time we played Philly. You guys. I have the videos on YouTube. Of it. And you guys, it was your crew. You guys went off.
It's literally like it was
people picking each other up. Everyone's fucking hell. It was great. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was a time for us to grow and kind of like figure it out, and then to your point, they asking like, how did the things formulate? So downtown stopped being ever something that we could do because the smaller clubs were really focused on drinking stuff. The last venue stopped in like 1998 for the small stuff. So we were out in my neighborhood, or we were out on the edge of the suburbs. And then post the 99 tour, Dysphoria asks me and Mike Brown, Black Mike for Punishment, to go on tour. And that unlocked like the rest of the map that we never saw. We go to California, we do all this stuff. And the whole time I've got 30 days of watching Chris explain this is what you do this. And I was really tight with Chris, but you really learn like we got to go back and do this. It made us want to do Punishment, and it also made us want to go ahead and start really like cutting our own area. At the time, there was one DIY venue that closed, and then the next door, the other one, the Kill Time, which was open for a couple years, happened. But we still found rooms in our area to start doing our own shows at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we started bringing, like, again, I always brought All Out War down. I always brought Death Threat down, but like the sad bit is we did Cold as Life, Death Threat, and Sworn Enemy, and that shit had 300 kids that had 100. Like by the 000 like by 001, 002, hardcore got cut in half again. And it's like, we're the cool guys over here. That heavy stuff isn't. And once again, it was back to the heavy stuff is Joe hardcore for something. Like, it took a while, but from going to shows at the church, Sean Agnew from R5 Productions is actually like a true. I hate they use the word legend so bad it doesn't even matter. That guy is a figure that he was doing ska shows in the punk venue that was open beforehand. And he went from doing ska shows to punk shows to every kind of shows. Mm-hmm. He's now the part owner of a giant venue that's been around for 13 years. He was the guy I went to. I'll get to that later in a second, actually. But he was really the main guy that helped me start This Is Hardcore. Sean Agnew met us when we were just asshole kids. And then a couple times, like Promise Ring and Hot Water Music. There were so many people. He's like, Go outside and yell at everybody to leave. If anybody else comes out, we have to kick everybody out. So we're goons. We, even though we're only like 19 years old, we're like, get the fuck out. Everybody, like yelling and screaming. He's like, all right, you guys can come in. And it was kind of like a funny relationship. Sometimes we get into fights. Sometimes Sean would yell at us. Sometimes he didn't care. And I started understanding, like, he had a really good situation to the point where by the early 2000s, we started doing security at his shows because he needed security, but he didn't want like the kind of obvious club band security. So he started working like that. And then he knew I was doing shows and he was kind of like, here's how you should do this. Because I don't even know if you know what you're doing. And he kind of refined the paperwork style that you have to send real offers in. But for the most part, I had some of that. I had like a prelim, like a real rudimentary version from Chris Beer, because Chris Beer did a lot of shows in his area in Lansdale and Allentown and all these different clubs in Pennsylvania. He showed me a basic formula. I saved the paper for 3 years. And I would basically say, this amount of people in the room, this is what the door price is. This is what the basic cost before one band comes. I need this many people to break even. And that was the basic. And now it's way more complicated and it's on Excel sheets and it's PDF sent out and all that. It's so much crazier. But it started with a piece of paper Chris wrote down for me. And then I just had to like tabulate and expect, like, I don't want to do a show if I need 80% of the room sold. I need somewhere like a safe bet of 50 to 65%. Unless in the show, I was like, I don't care. We're going to pack it all the way out. And if I walk away with $100, that's great, but I don't give a fuck. But those are shows eventually we would get down the road where we started selling out this one club that had like 400 people in our neighborhood. But I would do like All Out War and Death Threat and all these bands all combined. But that took time to build it up. Like again, like in these little things, you build it up, you get it smaller. Like the Buried Alive show was more like a neighborhood show. And very few people were trying to travel to our neighborhood. Then we started getting it good. And then we had giant fights that came from people outside versus people inside, which is always going to happen at neighborhood things. And then we had to restart again. But I would say the process is find a spot, get used to it. Don't never try to hit a home run. Just get on base immediately and start building relationships so you can bring more people in. And you got to balance having local people who will be at your show. Stop letting them pay to get in and say, get your ass up on stage and play. Because if a guy's at all your shows, he's probably got friends at also the shows. And if he says, yo, I'm playing the show, his friends are going to come. Right. Another big thing is we really didn't have a strong purely local Philadelphia scene. Like there was a lot of people who lived in Jersey, Delaware. And if you put a Jersey band on the show, they could bring 50 fucking people. You have to you have to remember that those people would go to that and try to pull from more than one source. And we got lucky early. It's harder now because there's so much immediate sensation, like satisfaction of like, oh, I just saw them like 2 months ago. Like you see the same band 5 times in a month. 25 to Life, Hatebreed, Sick of It All. You see all these bands all the time. Now it's lesser with those names, but there was a time where you see several times in a month the same band. And so I think that that's kind of whittled off. So you do have to build locally. You have to build just outside of your local circle, and you got to constantly bring more things to the table. It can't be the same thing that everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
Like
that's great advice for someone too who's thinking of doing it. Because it's not just, hey, let me throw a show together or get a flyer. Right, you got to build and do everything that you're doing here. And you brought up, this is Hardcore Fest, which is honestly to me, and I'm on Long Island here, is probably it is, if not the or the top FYA too, but maybe the biggest
FYA is a
Hardcore
killer.
Fest. Yeah, FYA is pretty, and oh man,
Dude.
the video and and like just the responses that all the bands get. It's just the energy just seems like from the moment everyone walks in till it ends, it's crazy there. But this Hardcore Fest is really grown into the biggest events of the year in the summertime. It's in Philly, but it sounds like people are coming from all over the Northeast to come and travel, and it's 3 days. So was that something you always wanted it, or just kind of blew up into that, kind of what you were saying before, how get on base and then try to hit the home run and go? Is that kind of how it kind of built up?
I'm going to tell you, it's complete happenstance of Hellfest 05 failing. We're sitting there. We knew that we were going to work. We knew we were going to help out in some capacity because there was going to be after shows they were talking about. And Tuesday, everyone started oh my God, Hellfest is falling apart. Like everybody who was in the know started saying, Hellfest is falling apart, Hellfest is falling apart. So by Friday night, there was Lifetime's reunion at the Trocadero with Bouncing Souls. There was the show that we ran security at, which was All Else Failed, Turmoil, and Coalesce. And so we worked security at that. Saturday morning was 108 Champion, a ton of bands. That joke band from DC that used to be around. There was 6 bands in the daytime, and then the nighttime show was at a venue Sean was doing different stuff at, and it was called the Starlight Ballroom, and it's not too far from the Electric Factory, and he did Lifetime headlining with 108 opening, and we were the security, and we're sitting out between the Saturday day show and the Saturday night show. We ordered 20 pizzas, and we're hanging out. And Sean's looking at the whole line outside. He's like, not everybody's getting in. I said, yeah, obviously. And I said to him, I'm like, dude, I can't believe so many people are here to Philly. And he's like, yeah, this is kind of crazy. I was like, dude, we could probably do our own fest next year. Mm-hmm. He's like, you want to do something? We could do something. He's like, it's not that hard. He's like, we could probably do it here. And so that was 05. I was on tour in Europe my first time. And I have this thing about writing shit down from a book I got when I was a kid called Write It Down, Make It Happen, where I just write lists. I write lists. I write thoughts. I just write fest. And I'll just start writing down band
manifesting stuff, right? Yeah.
I don't even think I was smart enough to feel like manifesting. I think for me, when I write it down, I recall it easier. Right. I can recall the information. Like when I do my show notes for the podcast, I write stuff down just so that way the memory, the recent buffer of memory, oh, you wrote that thing down. It's just the word pulls up quicker than if it's oh yeah, I have to remember that. It's I'll write it looks like serial killer notes. It'll just be one guy's name. I don't know why I read it that way, but I started going back with it. And at the same time, little did we know that was the beginning of United Blood was going to do one because there's no Hellfest. Sound of Fury picked up. And without Sean's tutelage and, he had the ticketing, he had the company. So we split everything 50-50. And he was the kind of the guy who would rein things in, I'd get the bands. And then by the second, third, fourth year, he might say, yo, this band's coming through. They'd be really good for this. Or, hey, what's our budget like? And he would make fun of me because I started using Excel sheets. And I would color it. He's like, dude, this looks like an acid trip. You got to chill it. We would laugh about it. But I learned a lot from the guy. And nothing was intentional with the exception of we should do this because enough people came. Philly wasn't New York, and we weren't New Jersey. New Jersey has more bands and more people than anywhere in the country. I still say that. Half of Philly bands have Jersey guys. Half of New York's bands have Jersey guys. They have so many people, and they have so many clubs and so many their own scenes. You can't call it the Jersey scene. There's 12 of them, and all of them have some of the best bands. So we were kind of the underdog, but when everybody started to get bigger, like the Club Chrome guy, he got bigger, like got big companies. We held on to our DIY thing. Like, like we stopped doing security for R5, let's say like 05 or 06. Cause Sean was like, you can do these shows without me. I'll help you. You put the show on, like we'll do it through R5. Like I went from security and ideas to you can do your own shows at the church. And then that went all the way up until like now where like Sean is living well and isn't even involved in the process of booking the church. And I've been doing church shows on my own for quite some time now. But it kind of like, I feel like I leveled up enough with the trust that we could do it. We've had some chaotic church shows and some awesome times, but it all came little by little. And, the thing that makes This Is Hardcore for me worth doing it is my favorite example is Bob Wilson is the guy who does FYA. If I had if I had one person I could say gets the idea of hardcore and how to do these things, it's him. And when he started getting more interested in stuff, I showed him stuff, and everything that he does trumps things that I've done. And I like it. And there's an idea where you want to be succeeded by your successors. You never want your successor to be weaker than you, because then what'd you teach them if you didn't make them better? And what he built with that thing is so organically important to younger kids, and there's always these new bands and always new things. And that's all out of his stupid brain and me giving him a little bit of, hey, this is how you do it. And over the years, him running with it. He's got a great record label. He's been in a million stupid bands, and he still runs around and finds venues all over the city. And if there's a legacy for Philadelphia hardcore, and there's a legacy for any scene, it's to teach people who eventually become like the Bob Wilson, who you've seen scenes. What happens when the guy doesn't do shows anymore?
Yeah.
There's like a power vacuum. And I saw it in our own thing, so I never wanted that. So like, we've got a really good thing in doing this. And for This Is Hardcore, this is our 19th year. There is currently there's currently on the map 32 American hardcore fests. 32. So in 2025, the idea of being big and all this is over. For me, I want to do this for as long as I physically can, and as long as God and everything wills it. So I can't thank everybody from the Electric Factory and all that stuff enough, but like, I don't see a way, at least not for a couple years, because there's a lot of smaller fests. It's like a big, same size pizza too. The same size pizza. Now there's different slices. Right now, the fest that's like at its apex or beginning to have its apex is Tied Down. And looking at why Tied Down, not only just because they have a great venue and Curtis and Jimmy are fantastic, those are the top 3 middle states in the country that would buy tickets from This Is Hardcore. Like, we would set it up so we knew all the statistics of this state and that state and this state. So it's like, I don't blame anybody. It's like, I'm not driving to Philly. I'll go from Ohio to Detroit, or I'll come from this. It makes sense for why they're doing well. California, I know you're from New York, so I need you to be calm about this. California has had the biggest hardcore punk scene since before anything else. Like, when AF was struggling and a band like Exploited would play in a small room in New York, they would play for 3,000 people in the Olympic Auditorium. That's just the way it was.
Yeah.
LA has always had the biggest fucking thing. So like the Sound and Fury guys and the Toy Drive guys, LA has always had the largest population for that shit. So it's awesome to see that when they really came back with that outdoor thing, are really continuing that. And I think there's a thing where people associate with This Is Hardcore for like, I didn't try to be the size that I was. Like, I wanted to do a thing with Sean. We did it at the Spotlight Ballroom. It held like 1,200 people. We packed it out 3 days. And then one time we did a Thursday night show with Underdog headlining church because they couldn't play the weekend, and that was the last year we did it. And then that venue was going to be sold. Sean got into a venue and was like part owner of the Union Transfer. We would do Thursday night shows there, like a Thursday of This Is Hardcore. But my relationship to the great booking agent and former promoter from Philly, Tim Bohr linked me with Brian Dilworth. Brian Dilworth is a massive underground booker. Like he's famously known for paying Fugazi more money than anybody else ever. And his wife ran her own independent record label. And when Tim's like, I think if you need to move on the Electric Factory, Tim made the introduction. I met up with Brian, and from 2012 till 2020, Brian would kind of like not steer the boat, be like, hey, like reel things in, like, what are you spending at? Like, Brian was like, Sean was my one mentor, and then Brian was like my next mentor, and he passed away. He passed away before COVID happened. Before COVID happened, like before we knew what the name was, like that same early that year, 2020. So, and you know, we've had some really good years, the Electric Factory, but there's so many of the same bands being able to play so many more places, and there's so many other things. I don't think This Is Hardcore. If I went out and tried to do a venue, like the venue the size of the Franklin Music Hall, which is what the Electric Factory would become, it'd be a bigger mistake than doing something that is like completely awesome, completely stacked, and controllable. You know, like, and I had a joke one time that at the 10th year of This Is Hardcore, I was going to do 10 shows in a row. And I was like, maybe that's to do, we'll just do 10 small shows. But I think the power is in doing like a smaller venue. Let's knock this one out of the park. Let's have a good year. We're working on the oral history of 20 years of This Is Hardcore. Yeah. And I'm also this year. Oh yeah, we're in 2025 now. This next month will be 20 years, actually 25 years since the first Punishment show. So me and Damien are writing not memoirs, not a zine, not a book, but we're basically writing shit and putting pictures in and getting all this Punishment shit together to kind of be like, yeah, that's what, I mean, Damien's a world famous tattooer. Everything that I did from the time that I stopped just being Dysphoria before This Is Hardcore, I learned in Punishment. A lot of those connections to the bands that I eventually put on This Is Hardcore came from Punishment, you know, and then later on when I joined Shattered Realm. So it's kind of like a thing to show people who are younger, like, you could be in a band that may not be the greatest thing on earth, but all these connecting points, all these people you run into, all these people that you eventually know, they do come back into your life if they're still in the same circle. And that's really like what a lot of this is. It's like running into people and they'd be like, oh, he's in that band now, or I know this guy. And I, you know, like there's people who I met when they were not doing anything who are now managers and booking agents and this and that. And you're like, holy shit, look where you're at. Like, I mean, look at Anthony Race. Look at all these guys doing shit still. Yeah. You know, like it's fucking fantastic. So this hardcore is going to continue, at least for a couple of years. We're gonna play it safe. I'm not afraid to say, like, if in hindsight, probably shouldn't have done so many of those years where we did 4 days. And also, like, last year, I'll say something that was a mistake I made. $70 was the single day ticket that most of the festivals had. I didn't pay a good enough attention. I just assumed that we had an agreement when I had the conversation. Hey, these ticket prices have to be consistently, like, we have to also see what the back charges are. The amount of charges that are on the back end of tickets, because I'm dealing with AEG, they're almost non-negotiable. And it was kind of yeah, and also yeah to Matty N. I believe if I would have saw that a ticket that was $70 would end up being like $96
with the extra charges and stuff. Yeah,
I probably would have reduced everything ahead of time. And that's like every year, same thing with a list. What went wrong? Tickets too high. Should have done this instead of that. But it's that zig instead of zag. Sometimes you do shit, you learn mistakes from it, and you grow. I'm not giving up on This Is Hardcore. And also you have to know your place. Like, you have to know, like, hey man, like there's times when some of this stuff has to go the flow another way. You know, like I'm not a sports guy, but like I imagine there's teams that have dynasties and then they walk away. I think that's a kind of decent example. But I'm not giving up on going to shows. I'm not giving up on going to shows. I ain't giving up on playing shows. I'm definitely not giving up on doing shows. but I got to know my space. And I also got to remember, like, when you become the old guy in the field, people just go, oh, there'll always be another This Is Hardcore, you know? So
Yeah, I don't know.
that's kind of
Right?
where we're at. That's kind of where we're at. I'm not mad
Yeah.
about it. Like, there's not like a woe is me. It's kind of like I'm 45 this summer. I started This Is Hard. The first, when we were talking about this, I was 25 the summer that Hellfest fell apart. You know, like, it's
Right.
20. There's a 20-year shift. Hellfest went down. This Is Hardcore came up. This Hardcore's going a little down. You got the big ones. You got FYA. And he moved to a different venue, bigger room. I was there. It was fucking great. You got Tied Down. Absolutely one of the best shit. Sound and Fury looks like Woodstock sometimes, seeing some of the videos.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then you also got to remember is all these smaller places have smaller fests of their own, whether they're 800, 500, 300. So the kids traveling from these smaller, what they call, there's actually a fest called Flyover Fest. All the states that bands would fly over. That's, yeah, like, so there's a fest called, like, there's so many new fests in all these different smaller Canadian areas where kids don't have to travel to one coast or the other, or Texas. So it's just part of a market shifting. And instead of being like, we can't operate at this level, it's like, brother, I started out in the smallest friggin' rooms in a part of the city no one's ever been to.
Right.
And if I had my druthers, I would have brought it back to the neighborhood. We just couldn't find a venue in the hall to do it.
Couldn't find something, huh?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something. So you talked about obviously all the traveling, the bands you were in, Bannable Punishment, and just the connections with all these bands and people, even us, right? Like you and I have known each other a long time. So how do you balance out? I'm going to use someone like me who's reaching out to you, DM, and like, hey, bro, we're available, and you always get back to everybody. Balancing that out, and then getting the fest together, and the idea that you probably have in building on that.
When it comes to people coming up, like, the thing to not do, the hard thing that promoters not do is some promoters will put a band on to satisfy the request. I am a fervent believer in the patient band who wants to play the right show will play a good show one day when the bill is set for them. The band that has to play, and there's tons of people that will book you in Philly, but it's that buyer beware. You can go play. There's 3 or 4 people who book shows, and guys will go, oh, well, you couldn't book us, so we went here. And then 60-40, 70-30. Dude, that show wasn't great. Yeah, I know that it wasn't going to be good, and I'm not going to be mean to you, but like, if I bring Overthrow down, that thing's going to be set so Overthrow has a good time, because I don't want to waste your time. You're an adult. You got a family, like, and then some of the young, like, you're not a young band that has to cut your teeth. You do got to reestablish yourself out there, but there's got to be the right bills. Sure. So you're not the band that everybody's outside for. And I've made mistakes in the past trying to help some people out. The biggest, used to call it the block party bands. It's like when everyone would go outside while the band was playing, or This Is Hardcore. One of the biggest, well, the whole fucking route, literally, I'm trying to watch the band. I'm like, where's everyone out? I go, it's a fucking block party out here. What the fuck happened to everybody? They're all outside. And it still bothers me, because I was like, this is a home run, this band. But what I didn't realize is I put a run of like two other New York hardcore bands in a row, and then a third New York hardcore band. It was the third band that got the block party. And I'm like, we got to break it up. You got to break, it's these little things. So I'm not going to put somebody who I've been friends with for a long time in a situation where the show is going to basically use playing for the 3 guys that you came up with. And it took me years to get to that point, because I would say, yeah, I'm going to hook them up. And then it's kind of like they're mad because it didn't work out the way they wanted. Like, you have to find the balance of where do these things fit, And I think that just comes, A, it's guests, but B, it's also like, we really know this audience. Like, we really know these kids are going to pay attention to them, and it's the balance. So I try to get back to everybody, because I don't want people to feel like they're blowing off. And sometimes I've replied early on to things like, let me see what I can do. And the hopes get up. So I'd like to go confidently and like, hey, I've got something for you. Might take a year for you. Hey, I got something for you. But when I have something for you, it's not, I'm throwing you a bone. It's, I actually have something for your fucking band.
Mhm.
So it works for
Mhm.
you. That's how I formulate it now.
That's awesome. And that's important for anyone listening to this who is booking shows starting up and looking to do it is really following that path that you just described right there, because that really sounds like a way of success and honestly doing it. Because like I said, so many people, so I can only imagine the people like me, how many people like me have reached out like that, and you just setting it up in a way where it works out for everybody involved.
I try to place everybody in the proper position, and then I just hope that the rest comes. And I always feel bad when I miss the mark, because I want the right thing to happen.
Mhm.
And it's an interesting formula, because some of it's gas and some of it's like, well, this is what previously worked, or this should be a no-brainer, and the bands that are our age, like right now, if we played with Punishment, played with some of these younger bands, like we played with Halloween, but we did with Bad Luck 13 and Punishment and all our friends. So we're going to be there. But if someone said to me now, like, hey, do you just Punishment want to play with these younger bands? I wouldn't do the thing like, oh, we're not playing late. I would be like, I've got to expect some young kids to not even be watching and be outside because they don't know. But like, there's really good shows at all age areas. Like we're age, I just have to find it. Like I did All Sprout and Boys as Fire, which are like two big bands from down here together.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, Sunday? Okay, we'll make it a Sunday matinee. The amount of people that were happy that both them bands got to play together and it was a Sunday matinee is like the perfect formula. Everyone's old. They got to get up at work in the morning Monday. We do a Sunday matinee. Everybody gets to go out. And the
Perfect
weather was
call. It
beautiful.
really is.
Yeah, like, and see, when you have to kind of look for like, is this the right time? Like, oh, right now, and there's a balancing point. Like, you could have a lot of the older bands always try to take the youth opening, but sometimes the youth sees their bands and don't watch anybody else, or they might be completely unfamiliar. And sadly, a lot of the kids, I think there's two kinds of kids: the kids that don't know, or the kids that they know this Arcane band that had a YouTube video of a demo and they obsess about that. But you're fucking Overthrow from Long Island. Like you were a Triple Crown, you're playing all over. And I think that more New York hardcore kids are like, oh, this fucking Overthrow. Like, you guys were a contender. You guys are playing PA, you're playing Rhode Island, you're playing all these places. And yet I got a kid tell me, what about this band? And they never played shows. They played 5 shows, man. Well, what? And I'm like, yeah. And then I start going, you ever hear about this band? Oh, yeah, but. It's like, don't, yeah, but me. Like, you're talking about a band that over time, how many people really saw this band? And they it's like this, here's my unique thing I know about and you don't. Yeah, there's a ton of Arcane. The older I get, the more I spend looking at the bands between like the era of like 70 to 78 and go, who was doing this? Like, how does this all like roll up into the early 80s? And you see some bands doing shit no one else did. And I'm not out there going, this band's the best band ever, but I'm more impressed that the years before and the years up to like 85, 86, there was more creativity in hardcore and from 86 onward. Then they kind of like, there's a formula that most people follow. And it's weird to see it, because then you have these kids that like, like the Youth Crew kids, or I'm the vegan straight edge kid. Then you see that these archetypes show up, and these archetypes ruin the ability for people to immerse themselves in more than one thing, and I also think another weird theory, I think in every little bit of those little circles, like the Youth Crew, there's a top 3, and then everything's after that. And then every couple years, every 5 or 10 years, those top 3 change. Remember Beavis and Butthead?
Yes.
Who did you have? Metallica, AC/DC.
AC/DC, yep.
Remember the nerd? The nerd is wearing the Winger shirt. And
that's right. Yeah, that's
so
right.
like, there's always that third kid who's wearing like whatever the Winger shirt is for that kind of style of hardcore. It's like, all right, that band's good. That third band sucks. Actually, I if for those of people who are into Winger, all of those bands would be canceled today. They literally had a song.
Absolutely.
I mean, their big hit was "She's Only 17."
Yeah,
it's so creepy. It's so crazy.
It really is. Like, imagine that coming out today. It wouldn't even make it.
No, would never.
You wouldn't even think they would write it.
Yeah, like it's crazy, but like that's how I think about music. I think in music genres, there's like a top 3, maybe top 5. You know, like it's hard to pick if you're saying like the first couple of years of hardcore and you're going Agnostic Front, Negative Approach, Youth of Today, Poison Idea, Cro-Mags, Gorilla Biscuits. That's a lot of different bands go, fuck, who's the top 5? Who's the top 5? Like you start getting sweat in your head and you're like, oh my God, I don't know which one it is. You know, like, and then you start talking. And then the other thing that I see in hardcore now is a lot of this formula approach of scientifically trying to classify hardcore by adding all these words to like, so I'm no longer using the term metalcore. If it's hardcore, it's hardcore. Shattered Realm has never said we're metalcore. We've always been a hardcore band. Punishment on the flyer has been written, everything, devilcore and this and that. We're fucking hardcore bands. We're not a metalcore band. I never did anything heavy metal in my life, even though despite how much I listen to a lot of death metal, I listen to a lot of black metal, and I listen to a lot of Viking metal. And my friend who actually is in the first band, he's really into death metal and black metal. I don't want to be in a black metal band. I want to take pictures just dressed up like black metal. And just I don't want to be in the band, but like I feel like these kids classify stuff and then they kind of make like, oh, I only listen to this, and it's like, well, where did you get this from? How did Leeway get this sound? Like that band Exodus, the Bounded by Blood record. They're about to play it at Decibel. So many people have said the Bonded by Blood Exodus record helped New York hardcore add thrash into their sound because that record came out in '85. So it's like you're always getting these kids classifying stuff, not realizing like this thing kind of like matured, aged, and it kind of like borrowed things from other stuff. That's why I love all the newer bands, but it's easier to go, oh, this is who they sound like. So when someone brings an old style back, like some of them young New York bands that are coming out now, I obviously Combust, it's fucking like they're like the flag bearer for like traditional New York hardcore. Yeah. How crazy to say? It's so rare that a band plays classical New York hardcore because for so long it was the Canadians and it was the Europeans, or it was like these people nowhere near New York City were playing the real deal hardcore. It fucking blows my mind. Sorry, that was a tangent. I went on a tangent.
No, not at all, man. No, not at all. And it's cool. You gave a lot of, it just showed you had your mentors in terms of getting where you are. You have to, in terms of looking into booking the shows, building the fest that you had, and you're going to just keep going with it, which is awesome. And obviously the connections that you made with it. Now with those connections, and obviously as long as I've known you, you've always loved talking hardcore.
My whole life.
Right. And that's what led to your podcast that you have right now. That's always a fun listen. You always have great guests. And I think I just answered it, but is that the reason why you wanted to start it?
I have the problem of shooting down all the things I want to do before I ever start doing them. Like I want to do this, like, and then it was like, I don't even know. And then I was like, oh, one of my best friends, Richie Crutch, Post America podcast. I was on it several times. I saw all the fucking gear and I got now I have an extra fucking thing here and I got all this extra stuff, but like, I didn't know what to do. And then like, I limit myself by saying like, dude, how long is it going to take to do this? And, the first couple episodes, OG Jeff, who's not as like one of my closest friends, he's in the Broad Street Breakdown with Vinny Paz and Pablo. Like those guys had a podcast for years before I ever did one. I had these guys help me and I should have had more confidence to be like, fuck it and do it. And it was during COVID. So we got so stuck on the Zoom. Right now, my current thing is more people want to do stuff in person now. And more people want the cool video clips. And that adds a layer of like, all right, this is more shit that I want to deal with, but I want to do good podcasts. My friend, and this I'll tangent, but we're going to come back to tie into what you were saying about like mentors and all that. The other thing I would tell somebody is, you are someone who's doing anything, doing a band, doing a record label, doing shows. Everybody who is doing stuff like that, they're here to teach you. Rich Hall, RIP, my actual like brother, Rich Hall, obviously great in New York. I terrorized him. He would yell at us. We'd fight at some of the shows, that kind of deal. But when I started, actually that weekend, he was hanging out with us all the time because Hellfest fell apart. And he was telling all the backstory. This is what happened. And this is why this is up. And we're hanging out with him. And I said to him at the end, like, I might try to do this with Sean. He's like, well, call me. Give me a hand. Let me know if you need anything. Mm-hmm. From 05 to now, this is actually the first this arc I've had to work on without any input from Rich Hall. And
wow.
every single guy who's ever booked shows, if they're worth their salt, will give advice or ideas to people. Everybody in hardcore is sharing wisdom. And I know people, I just don't know how to do it. We got to fucking ask. That's back to the podcast thing. What gear do I need to buy? Oh, Sonny Singh went with me. Buy this kind of mic, the same mic I have here. Oh, you need this kind of thing to be on your desk. Okay, you need this. Then, hey, how do you guys edit? Well, these guys use this program. These guys use this program. I started with one program. 20 episodes later, I got the one I still have now. You know, like everything is open source in our community. And people need to know this instead of like being afraid to ask the questions. You want to ask me a question about, hey, what's the contact for this band? Hey, what would you pay this band? Hey, I regularly give people my Excel sheet, like, hey, this is my weird ass way. This is how I break down my expenses. It's the same fucking thing that Sean gave me almost 20 years ago. Yeah. It's the same fucking one. Mm-hmm. We are able to help each other. And that's why I wanted to continue to grow. Now, with the podcast, it's very similar because everybody has their own thoughts. Like, hey, how come you never got this guy? Or, hey, you grew up in 90s zines. I grew up in 90s zines.
Yeah.
I made it a point, and I still make it a point every my guest. We start off the way you and I spoke before you hit record. This isn't a gotcha. I'm not going to ask you a question that I don't want anybody to listen to. We're having it's like the ref. We're having a clean game here, folks. I'm going to have a conversation. We're going to have a good time. Mm-hmm. Let's dig into deep. Let's talk what you want to do, because the better content isn't the drama. The better content. Hey, do you want to talk about that hard thing that people didn't know, knew about? That's not what the guy wants to talk about. If he wants to bring it up organically in the conversation, that's his will. Paris Mayhew and Paris bullied me into my first video, and I should have listened to him. He's like, you should get on YouTube. The only episode that's been on YouTube that has like 30,000 or whatever views is because of the YouTube with him. And I still, like a cunt, have not put them all on YouTube. Now the thing puts it automatically on YouTube. Like, eventually, I've never monetized this. I never thought about monetizing this. There was a minute where I tried to do Patreon, and then I got stuck on 12-hour days of work, and I said, all right, we're not doing Patreon. I can't keep up with it. But I think that anyone can do this if they're earnest about the kind of conversations. If you're trying to be like a 90s zine and get you on some gotcha shit, and I've had Chubby Fresh, I've had Dwid, I've had some iconic, Norm Brandon from, God, I'm getting old. I forget the stupid Norm Brandon from Texas a Reason, and the Annie Manor zine. Like, those guys were revolutionary, like, only in the sense of everybody talked about either Norm zine and what was said in Norm zine, or what Chubby and Dwid. They come on my show and they're not talking shit on anybody. They're just, you can control the content by having a good conversation. And a lot of the stuff that the feedback that I get from my podcast is, dude, I love listening. It's like hanging out with friends, or, oh my God, I learned this thing, and I don't try to learn stuff. I ask questions like I should be saying, hey, Chris, remember that venue here? Because it'll stoke your idea to talk about it more, instead of being like the overview. Let's just get through so I feel like I covered everything. People want the nuances. They want the little things that they may not have known, like, you don't have to be like a super know-it-all podcaster. You just ask earnest questions. And if the story is in that person to tell, they're going to tell it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. There's people now I have to think about, like, okay, there's younger people now I should probably include more. And I've tried to do a little bit of it, and I realized I might have been off the mark as far as like what the most popular guy in the world wants to talk about. But I've had a couple younger people on, and I like hearing their stories, and when it's parallel, like the guy James Alassio, who's in Ends of Sanity, who manages all these bands. Oh, he's a Long Island kid. And he took all these Long Island kids on their first tours. And people get to hear, oh, here's a guy who did all this, and he just did this 10 years ago. That's what you want to instill in people, and that's why I like doing the podcast. Whereas the oldest guys or the youngest guys, I like when someone can relate at least to the person, or oh, I did that too. Like
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And that's one of the reasons why. And I think I said before we started, taping this, it took me 2 years, so a year and a half to get this going. Finally, and I give it to my wife for getting me going with getting, the last couple of weeks ago, getting this going. And I agree. It's the stories, it's the conversation, and just hearing about that stuff. I think makes it. That's the podcast I enjoy listening to, and that's what I enjoy what you do. And you had some really good interviews. The Tim from VOD interview, was the best, because it was just like listening to you two just bullshit and talk, and it was just talking about all the things that from the '90s up until now. That was a good one.
For me, I wanted to have I always like to go deeper, but you have to know in conversation where the limits are. And then I was like, you know what? Let's just keep this simple. Let's get Tim on here. If he wants to come back, I'm going to have Dwid back on here soon. And he's like, I thought you wanted an overview. And I'm like, you talk about whatever you want. So we're actually going to go all the way back, and he's going to talk about the early Integ, the early straight edge stuff, and some of the stuff that we didn't cover. And, sometimes you can have a second pass with someone, but I think the culture and the stuff that we like, I'm not Gene Simmons. You're not Gene Simmons. Them guys all sat, I actually went outside the Trocadero and got my ticket signed by Rob Halford when he was in the band Fight. I was that level of metalhead, sign my ticket, Rob Halford. As an adult, I have a sword signed by Manowar and a flag signed by them, because I also did that because I'm fucking crazy, and literally was cool. Sign my sword, Manowar. But that was 10 years later. But hardcore people can't be Gene Simmons. They can't be hiding behind some barrier. That cuts off that circulation of what this guy knows who could be passed down culturally. There would still be an FYA and Bob, because Bob has that intensity and that love of hardcore. But it's because I was able to help Bob that I think it accelerated some of it, because I didn't gatekeep him. I never, I always wanted him to be the very best he could be.
Yeah.
And I did feel earlier on, there was a sense of the bands who were playing behind barricades and we're not going to come out. But then you'd see a normal hardcore dude just out in the crowd, just chilling, no problem. And then you're that's the guy. To me, the guy Dave from Vision, who passed away, Dave from Vision was the all-American, great hardcore frontman. Didn't hide in the back, was always out front talking to everybody. Anthony Kami now he's getting older, but I remember the first time I went to New York and seen Killing Time, hey Anthony, oh bro, we from Philly, oh, that camaraderie. You don't feel yes, sire, hello, it's yo, my man, yes. You want that connection, and honestly, that's what makes hardcore. That's supposed to make hardcore different. When we're having a conversation, unless it's private outside, if I'm having to talk to my friend, they're hey, I won't bother him. Jump in the conversation. We can all have fun. You want to get everybody laughing and having fun outside of a show.
I agree. And that's why we got into it. And for me, it's what I loved about hardcore is you go to these shows, obviously we grew up, you go to big concerts. That's where it starts with when you're young. But then you're walking in as a young teenager, shows, and the bands are walking around, and it's just everyone's talking and hanging out. And that's what captivated me, and kind of similar to what you're describing. And I agree with you with that, in terms of the scene.
Well, you want them to feel comfortable, you want to, and you should. It's hard to remember everybody's name. It's hard to remember it is 5 seconds ago. Couldn't remember damn Norm Brandon and Antimatter Zine. It's there's so many names in your head and so many thoughts, but the guy who's going to come back and feel happy or not put their eyes down and just give you the money and walk, engage. I don't know what I'm doing at the door. It's hard, but we're outside chit chatting, unless it's something serious. Yo, jump in, say some jokes. I actually I made a joke about a side quest podcast where I set up a camera and we're just talking shit outside, because there's so many people can we just hang outside? And I'm let's just do a whole podcast where we're just talking shit and hanging outside. But you might have people censor themselves, but hanging outside. Hanging outside the show is so much fun. It's a blast. It's the show, dope. I want to see this 3 bands. There's 8. I'm hanging out. Yep. And I know that may sound fucked up or wrong, but it's that's the connecting point. Is like, who am I like especially it's like like there's a million bands that play every fest. There's a million bands that tour a lot. And there's these limited opportunities to see an old friend, or hey, I got to catch up with you, and hey, whatever happened with that thing? And because we're trying to focus on the bands, you never really get that out of you, So I like the connectivity, and I think that the more of people from our specific age talking about to our friends about shit, the more some of this stuff is going to get drawn out. Like I think Anthony Race is unsung. I mean, you see Christian McKnight from Cleanser, dude's the dude's the Sultan of New York. That dude controls everything. He's fucking amazing.
He's the man. I had him. He's coming up. I spoke to him on this. We had an awesome conversation, and he's his experiences too. Yeah, he's a good dude. He's
fantastic. So. But see that, but he's a hardcore guy who elevated himself. And instead of staying up there, I can't help you. He's still pulling people up
all the time.
And that's what hardcore is, man. Like that's in its essence. It's like you're not gonna get buried with your hardcore rep. Like, I mean, technically people may remember you, but you want it to flow down to people, like after Bob, there's a guy, his name is Ben Stuckey. This Stuckey kid is gold. In 10 years, he's going to be the king of this earth, I think. But when I first met him, I liked him, and then I wanted to kill him for a little bit. And now I love him like a little brother. But like, you want all these guys to be raised in the environment where they learn how to succeed, they have support, and they feel welcomed. So they want to hang around. Right. That's
what it's about, right? So that's what it's all about, man. And it's just it's that's what's cool, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Also, is it's awesome getting to reconnect with old friends, getting to talk to you, and all the stuff that you've been doing, and then also people, just to like your point, but for you, what they can learn and hear from you in terms of the stuff that you're doing and continue to do. But we're not done yet here, because I definitely want to talk the new Shattered Realm. The new EP Kills, man. That came out in December. So you want to talk a little about how it came about? And then I know you got some shows coming up. You got a show with Strife, I think, coming up, and some other things.
This has been a weird year for us. So 2023, Joe, a.k.a. J-Way. When I talk about Bayway, I often call him Jason. I'm like, Jason. And he laughed. Like, we laugh. We talk a lot of shit to each other. He says to me outside of a Ben Stuckey show, hey, I'm going to come up and play this show, and I want to play you some songs. I was writing Bayway songs, but they ended up being too Shattered Realm. And I was like, well, let's go listen to this. And I sat in his car, and he's got this crazy, like, TV-sized thing with the lights. And he's playing me these songs. And, all right, I'll backstep for 1 minute. Shattered Realm started, and we were in Punishment. They were in Shattered Realm. By 2003, the first singer and the drummer left. I was asked to play in the band. I turned them down because the Punishment van was currently on fire. And we had to get home from California to Philadelphia. When I got home, I'm like, I'm not going on tour. I need to get my shit together. Me and my dad had a business. Things didn't work out with me and my dad in the business. I went and started doing my own work. And that following summer, Punishment did our last tour, taking Blacklisted on their first tour. Driving across the country, I got a phone call. Hey, do you want to play in Shattered Realm? Punishment's over. My life is kind of a chaotic mess. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll tour Shattered. When? August. Like, right after Hellfest, we go on tour. So I spent all of the 2004 and last week of the tour listening to it's very hard when you know the songs, but when you listen with the lyrics, it's harder to remember it. So from 04 to about 2009, we were semi-active. We did European tours, US tours. We recorded an EP, and then I got on house arrest. And when I got on house arrest, I was like, hey, you guys do what you want. I can't do it. I did one more show for Eulogy Fest and a benefit show, and then that was it. And they connected with Chris Rafalowicz, who's now in the band. Jesus Christ, I started saying it and I forget the name. Blackest Dawn, with Alex, who was the original guy, and Al, who was the original guy. They're the original Shattered Realm guys are now the band Blackest Dawn, who we had play with us, and we've played the stage with them a couple times already. I left the band and I helped them out with some shows. They break up. And then in 2017, I do a benefit show under the term All Will Suffer. And it was a one-time benefit, and some of the ex-members acted like I played Madison Square Garden, which to then I decided, fuck you, I'm just going to do the band and I don't care. From 2017 until 2003, with the COVID year of us not really doing anything, we never wrote something substantially able to match what Shattered Realm had previously done.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of players, tons of guys came in and did a couple shows here. We played Chicago, we played Florida, but nothing ever hit until that minute where I hear in his car shit that I'm like, this is Shattered Realm. Like, he unlocked the key. All the people that came, and these are terrific players, really. No, not like, oh, they suck. No, they were all amazing players. They couldn't, but he was in a band called Years Spent Cold as a kid. He grew up as a New Jersey hardcore guy in the flesh. He lived this. He was there in the pits. So him writing this shit was like, holy fuck, someone cracked the code. At the time, we had a different drummer and we had a couple different guys in the band. And I was like, well, how do we do this? He's like, well, I can come in and play guitar, and if you need me, I have a whole band. So I'm like, well, let's see what happens. And we played one more show with him on guitar because our guitarist couldn't do it. And that was 2003. 2023, Keystone was the first time he played with us on second guitar. And then it was, hey, we just swapped out lineups. Tony O, the bass player who was there when I started doing it, when we started doing more shows, Tony O stayed on bass since 2017. We went to Europe together to do a one-off. And so me and Tony O have always been looking for the right guy. And he shows the fuck up with these songs. And you're like, literally, I'm sitting in a car going, and I told my girl, I'm like, I can't fucking understand where this dude got this shit from. So then it was iteratively like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then it was like, so Shattered Realm is now Joe, Mr. Bayway on guitar. You got Tony O on bass. You got Dave, who's a monster on drums, and Chris from Bayway as it. So it's like Shattered Realm is three-fifths Bayway.
Yeah.
And that's how this formed. And so we talked a lot about like ideas. We would do like our first big practice before we had this North Carolina Fest in 2024. And I was talking about, hey, we should start doing this. And they already had the beginning of these ideas. So after that, we spent the summer going back on it. And then right after This Is Hardcore, we went 2024. We went really heavily into recording the EP. J-Way has Bayway Studios. I've never had to record something. Like, I talk like this. And this is how I want to scream, too. I don't want to be, like, killing my voice.
Mm-hmm.
We had a regular mic just like this, and it was so fucking easy. And I have videos. We're laughing the whole time. It was the easiest recording process. And so he provided the background to bring those songs together. And then because we wanted people to you hear a new song from a band, you don't know how it's going to sync up with the old stuff. So we re-recorded This World Is Mine.
Yeah.
Just as a litmus.
It came out great.
Well, that's exactly it. And it really was like, someone was like, oh, that was really good. You did an old song. So people kind of get the grasp of what do old songs sound like. So that's the EP. And it's out on Bayway Records. And we love that because we love being as DIY as we can. And we have, I want to say it's an LP. I think that's the formal way. That is going to be something that comes out later this year, like maybe 9 or 10 months from now. Awesome. But that is the combination of what you heard from the EP and the remaining songs. And the most fucked up part about it is the intro is awesome. We love you're Italian, so you love the Rome. Like, I'm a major history that, like, I'm spent a lot of hours. That was like the ultimate thing. But for us, that whole thing, Point of No Return, we semi-based it. It's based in Shattered Realm, but it's also based upon the crossing of the Rubicon for Julius Caesar. I know this is a little bit metaphorical, but us recording this Point of No Return this is the new fucking Shattered Realm, and this is the new music. And that's why, like, the lyrics are completely like, we lost our way. You know, like, it's about, like, we're getting back. Like, we're back. And I know it's younger because it's so cheesy, but it's not. It was a really good allegorical way to get back on point. And Strong Hands is a really fucking heavy, monstrous song. But the shit that like is still in the pot is still probably the better of the newer material. Like the stuff that's
Awesome.
like we saved that for the bigger piece. But
They're
it's
all
all
recorded?
those,
You're all recorded up? Is
yes.
that done? It's all done.
Yeah, no. We are now in the process that you love, which is probably writing lyrics, figuring out how to do it.
Okay.
But we have time. We have time. Like Bayway is a machine that is
Yeah.
going like
They're
they're in Texas.
everywhere. They're good.
Yeah,
Couldn't you-
they're in Texas in 2 weeks. Well,
They're coming to
they were
Long
just
Island next week. With Year of the Knife, Private Mind,
yeah. At that show. Yep.
at AMH. Yeah, yeah. And then
Yep.
there's some other bands I can't recall, but yeah, they're playing. They're coming back here.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like this is like Shadow Realm's the extra guest on the Bayway show. Like I want to see Bayway crush it because all them guys are like, I mean, he's a family man. Obviously, he's got the A, not an O or an I, but he's still Italian. He still makes his own gravy, so you love that. But like his business is outside of a former ravioli factory. Him and his wife make their own products. Like that guy's a
Wow, that's
grinder.
great.
That guy's a hustler. He used to do
Yeah.
masonry work. Like that guy's not like that guy's born from like the kind of guys who want to grit and grind. He overcame a lot of shit, addictions, all this stuff. And he's putting a full focus into a record label. His Bayway Studios is fantastic. He sings in fucking 25 to Life. He has
Yeah,
time for
he's
Shadow
doing that
Realm.
now.
Like,
Yeah.
when you like, for me, my energy was kind of low, and he was this it's like a pick me up of energy. Like, you're excited, I'm fucking excited. Like, his inertia becomes my inertia and excitement to do it. And I'll say this: we are in the process of doing all the artwork, but there is going to be a reissue of the Broken Ties Spoken Lies OG record.
Cool.
That's going to come. That's a vinyl release that's going to come out sometime. And like, there's all this stuff spinning and pushing to get Shattered Realm a little bit further down the line. Like sometime in the next couple months, we're going to be doing, we got the show. We're playing with Strife. Strife is playing in New Jersey on the Friday and Sunday in Philly. And so it's funny. We're playing a Shattered Realm with Strife in Jersey, and then Strife is playing with Bayway, with Joey in 25 to Life in Philly.
Yeah.
And actually on Super Bowl Sunday, they're playing. So it's going to be a wild show at the church, Sunday matinee. And their inertia is like unstoppable. I think if they just continue to grow, like it's going to be fucking awesome. Like they've got a lot of really big shows. They're going to be traveling a lot. And, sometimes you need somebody else to come in and add spark. Like it's hard to pull something uphill, and it's hard to get that inertia that rolls downhill. And we've got all that going. And Greg Mongoloids has been a big hand. We got we're have a couple more announcements that are like more perfunctory for like the internet. They'd be like, we announce it's on this label and this is when this is, but it's the resurrection and the reaffirmation that we're not going to be the old band that only plays the new stuff. We're metering it out. So if you're going to see Shattered Realm, you're going to hear the songs you want to hear. And we're gonna pepper in the new stuff, the new stuff. I've been there too many times where you're like, I can't wait to see this band. Where's the old stuff? We've all been there. I'm not doing that. I've been on the side of the stage when the band starts playing the new stuff and the kids walk out. It'll never happen for us. We're not fucking doing it. Plus, the stuff is better than some of the genuine article. It's so reproductive, but then I don't understand how you would do it. I'm not like, it adds all the elements, but maybe it's the sound itself, the way the music's recorded now, or the way just the energy, it feels fresh, even though it's very in line with what Shattered Realm fans would have heard from Shattered Realm. And that's all those guys. I just show up and say the dumb words at this point.
Yeah, EP crushes though, man. It was really good. It was a nice, for me, surprise. It came out in December. It was awesome. So yeah, you guys looking forward to the LP when that comes out. End of the year, it sounds like, give or take.
Yeah, we're playing. I think we're playing with Crown of Thorns, Bayway. Yeah, Shattered Realm.
You're playing in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In March. Yeah, like that's the thing where I go like, oh yeah, I'm playing that. It's cool. I don't ever get worried about it. I gotta go. All right, we'll get up there that day and do it. But it's nice because Shattered Realm we did a lot of stuff. Like You know, we went to Detroit, we went to Chicago, we went to Hold This Life stuff. We played Pittsburgh, we played a lot of these places, but we weren't getting on the right bills aside from the stuff that was like local, like we would do well local. That EP is getting people like, hey, what about you guys doing this? Hey, what about you doing that? Like, we got some stuff I'm not technically, I hate to say, like, we're not really allowed. I also learned, I don't know, when you did the new record, the last record that came out in Triple Crown, do you remember having to say, like, hey, we got to wait for the new record to come out?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
like,
I couldn't stand saying that, but I had to.
As someone who books shows, I always hate it when bands are like, oh, we're going to wait for the new material. I've now had to wait for the new material. And I'm like, fuck, this is stupid. I hate this. And that's kind of what happened. It happened with the EP. It's about to happen again with the LP, where it's like, we can't do too much because we know down the line we don't want to under or overplay. It's that balance. So Bayway is going to destroy the whole planet this whole year because they've just got a fire forever. And we're going to try to meet out what we can so people check out the EP and then hopefully get them excited for the LP. And we're doing some Europe stuff and some America stuff.
That's great, man. That's awesome. That's going to be exciting. Looking forward to hearing that and the album, obviously, when it comes out. Joe, this is awesome, man. But before we end, I do this quick rapid fire stuff. First thing that comes to mind with some of these things that we want to do. So I have a list of questions here we can go with here.
Sure.
So quickly here, favorite venue to book a show?
The first answer immediately is the First Unitarian Church, just because it's our thing, like it's our thing. Like I was thinking the church. I mean, there's other ones that I love for other different smaller rooms more than the bigger rooms, but the church. It's just it's so iconic to Philadelphia, and I am proud that we brought so many bands that never had a chance to do it. Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits, all these bands we put in that room. It's fucking great.
Cool. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Promoting or performing?
Promoting.
If there's one hardcore band you could revive to play a show, who would it be?
Warzone. Warzone. If it's that would be like the if it was like Resurrection Revive, it'd be Warzone. If it was a band I'd like to see return and like get back, I really wish Dysphoria, with all these kids who are really into heavy, it would have been awesome to see Dysphoria be more active in the last 5 years, because a lot of younger kids would have bought into it.
They were a good band.
They were like super technical, and I think kids buy the t-shirt or like it, but I think if they would have been active, they might have caught on, and I'm disappointed that we didn't do it. We couldn't get them to do that. They're all older guys with families and kids and shit and responsibilities. I get it, but that would have been it. Like, let's see if these guys get a chance.
Mm-hmm. So your favorite This Is Hardcore Fest, I guess the one you're most proud of that you put together. You have a lot of them. This might be a tough answer, actually.
I want one more second to really make sure I'm 100% full of it. 2013, because I managed to get Judge, 7 Seconds, and also All Out War on the same day. And like I'll always be happy that a band that I grew up as a child, we're the first headliner. Suicidal Tendencies was our first headliner, the Friday Night
Them too, yeah.
It was like surreal to be like, and like Mike Muir was amazing, but like billing wise, 2013 was one of the best bills I got to put together. That was, I didn't realize, but we were starting, that should have been the apex year. That was like that good. It was fucking fantastic.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was, we did the bowl, the blue, black, and blue bowl, and Judge played. And then I remember you dropped that lineup was incredible. Sick by 4 months after that. What did you listen to last?
Oh, that's pretty simple. I can pull it right up because I was just listening to it. Is currently in the hardcore thing, the last thing that I listened to was Do or Die, the fucking Dropkick Murphys thing. And then the metal thing, Cradle of Filth just dropped a song called "To Live Deliciously." So whenever new metal stuff, like the new stuff from metal pops up, I'm like, oh, let's hear this, and it's either good or bad. But I've been on a real Dropkick Murphys kick lately, and we might be doing the record in its entirety at a show soon.
Ooh,
So,
okay.
yeah, so another reason why I think I've been listening to that for like a week and a half straight.
Makes sense. Do you prefer vinyl or digital?
Digital. It's so much easier. I have boxes of vinyl. I sold a lot of vinyl in 2005. My mom was going through a really hard time and I was out on a tour and I sold a shit ton of vinyl. And so I had to learn that owning things doesn't take like, I know my older guys who are like 10 years older than me said, yeah, same thing. Like they sold all their best stuff. There's guys that have to buy it 10 times more. I'm sad I don't have some of the things, but I did save things that were specifically close to me. Like I probably still have the Overthrow 7-inch. I probably still have stuff like bands that like were like you guys were like one of these bands that trusted us when we were new doing this. So like I always stayed. I didn't want to I actually got rid of more records that were probably like I sold the Bulldoze 7-inch and stuff like that. But I kept the smaller bands that are lesser known because I like had
Harder
that
to find
real,
too. Yeah.
kind of been harder to find. Just totally like this is a record that I know like the people are like, yeah, I'm really close with all the Bulldoze guys now, but these are my guys. Like I wouldn't want to get rid of these things because it would bum me out, you know?
Right. But I'm with it. Vinyl is obviously great, but digital is just so much easier, right? You can listen to anything you want.
Easier. Yeah.
Top 3 favorite albums. Doesn't have to be hardcore, but your top 3 favorite albums of all time.
Metallica Master of Puppets.
Me too. It's amazing.
It's just so I had that in my pickup truck on CD, and it skips in the solo before Sanitarium, before that last riff, and I don't care. Actually, no, incorrect. I said Sanitarium, but I meant Orion. Before that last little, when they're doing that like melody before the last chugger to bring it out. That was the first Metallica tape that I bought. My next door neighbor was my older cousin. He had Ride the Lightning. That's what got us into this. And I was excited to be like, boom. I got to see Metallica and Injustice for All tour. Got to see them again with Danzig, Suicidal Tendencies at this JFK field in Philadelphia. And then thankfully, even though I had the black tape, I never got to see them when they started with all the other stuff. So I'm kind of very happy with that. I would say hardcore, I heard Pause for Alarm on the tape before I knew that they had faster songs. So like there's just something about it's Agnostic Front, Live at CBGB's, and Calls for Alarm are the 2 records that were like so important to hear, so important to hear. And then, like records that you can always listen to shift greatly. Like what are you listening to now? But for me, like, I think if it was like an important was, again, like just because of being in the process of it all, the Dysphoria LP and the CD was like, this is a band that had tapes, like 3 separate demo tapes. And then they have a CD and the CD's a monster. We went on US tours together. Like I was the roadie for it. Like that's the anthem that would set up prior future successes for us. If we didn't go on these tours and didn't have these experiences, because they went on tour with that CD, a lot of things for me would have been different. I still think I would have done shows. I think I would have toured. Punishment wouldn't have immediately ran out the door like we have to do it. Like we literally, me and Mike Brown made a plan. We're going to be on tour this time next year and do our own band.
Cool.
And that's kind of why we're writing that book thing I'm talking about, because it's such a dumb idea. Great. Well, I'm fucking 19, he's 18, and we're like, we're going to do this fucking tour. And that was all purpose. So like without Dysphoria, that their full LP, like I don't think that it would have all happened immediately. It would have happened, but in different stages. And also because they took us out and, you know, whether it was Long Island, Rhode Island, Brockton, Virginia, Detroit, Chicago, Pennsylvania, like they brought us along to mosh and sell merch, and we made so many connections that were integral as like in a pyramid. Like we already had the base, but those next level out of town connections you need to make were made by being with that band. So I can't dismiss the importance of what that record did for me personally.
Awesome, man. VOD self-titled or imprint?
Self-titled.
Self-titled. Mm-hmm.
Only because when I got that, listen, imprint's a motherfucker. I'm telling you, this imprint, I don't think that there was anything like New York hardcore touching that when that thing came out. But when self-titled came out, man, whether it was CC's, Middlesex County College, Lehighton, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, that band, you almost couldn't see the physical band because of the crowd. It was like a human wall, man, and it was so ill. And not to dog it, but like when the further they got into being in the barricade, it was still ill, but you didn't get that. Like, dude, they're not self-titled. Yeah, like they played the Stone Pony on the self-title, and like that was like, this is something different. Like that was a movement. That was amazing.
Yeah, I always say with them that Long Island wise, in terms of when they started blowing up from 95 to 90, that's 95, 96, pre-Roadrunner, that SFT still, and shows they would play at the PWAC, and I've never seen anything like that before. You know, Glassjaw blew up, saw that.
Yeah.
Face was such an underrated Long Island hardcore band. They were getting that
absolutely
buzz, but VOD literally probably drew with Madball at the PWAC. Probably close. Christian and I were talking about that. It had to be close to 1,500 people at that place, and this is before they were on Roadrunner. It was insane, and a lot of that self-titled songs on that self-titled were there. So I would agree with you with that.
It's just it's a momentum. That's a momentum for them too. You know, like
yeah, absolutely. Scratch the Surface or Built to Last?
Scratch the Surface.
Yeah.
Sick of It All was like one of my favorite hardcore bands, and I had kids in my high school asking me what Sick of It All was when Scratch the Surface came out, and by Built to Last, they were. It's not a diss to them, but like they were already looking bigger. Like, you know, like it was like you've seen them in a couple smaller spots, and I've booked them a handful of times. That's the one New York hardcore band that I love, that I've never had the iconic, best, great Sick of It All. Like I've done, and Craig's was there with all these amazing Cro-Mags. I was like, I just want one Sick of It All set like this, man. Like, you know, like I love that band for so much. And then Built to Last, I don't look at it as like a musical divergence. The band just started playing different rooms and doing different kind of tours after that. And I think a lot of it, they also became like, they played a lot in Philly. And I think that if they would have played like once or twice a year, it would have been crazier if they played a little less at that time.
Mm-hmm. Couple more. Set It Off or Demonstrating My Style?
I listened to Set It Off more, and I did see them when that tour came out. They actually was Downset, Madball, Dog Eat Dog, and the opener for Philly was Hard Response. And I got a complete fucking KO, like flash knockout in the pit. I was a kid, and that was insane. But when Demonstrate My Style came out, it was like you're an acolyte at Madball. By the time I like, you know, like I still had the long hair, but I was like not on the side of the pit. I'm in this pit, you know, like that was like the height of Madball. Like that was, I think, like there was a couple other moments that would come later, but like that Demonstrate My Style Madball was so raw and aggressive, and it was unbelievable, man. Like I just like the same kind of inertia, energy of VOD set, like that, those crowds, everybody, it was fucking few bands could, and so many bands want to touch into the Madball formula, but they haven't reached that Demonstrate My Style, like that energy from the crowd, you know, like, and if Set It Off had Demonstrate My Style crowd, I don't even want to know what it'd be like, because we were seeing them in smaller places.
Yes, both are incredible. Back of the Bus on Demonstrating My Style is like one of those underrated songs. I wish they play them more,
Yeah.
play it more live. That song's sick. Last one here, and then we're close to wrapping it up. A band you like that may surprise people.
I mean, I love Texas Is the Reason. I love
Me too.
Quicksand. I needed to settle down into that stuff. Once I understood that the guys who were in the 80s straight edge bands moved on and were trying to do something new for them, I got it. But it sounded, all the dudes, I hate people in my school. I was like the againster, like Nirvana, yeah, I had the CD, but it wasn't my whole lifestyle. Pearl Jam, I lied to a girl to say I liked it because she asked me if I liked it, and I didn't really talk to girls. I had mad zits and I had braces and long hair. So like, if this girl's gonna talk to me, I'm gonna lie. Yeah, and I had to ask my friend, "What's Pearl Jam?" I really liked stuff also that from that period. Like I really liked Hum. And actually, really early on, we saw the Deftones open for Civ. We see the Deftones at HMV. We seen Deftones in Handsome at a very small bar in Philly. So way early on, like ground level, they're playing free shows. I saw Deftones.
Cool.
I don't own the last 2 records they had, but like the first 3 LPs they had, I think are fantastic.
Agree. They're awesome. They're awesome.
Other than that, 9 Inch Nails. Like the first time I saw them was when they Marilyn Manson opened and the Jim Rose Circus with the weird torturing shit. But 9 Inch Nails was and Ministry, like that kind of stuff. That stuff really was jarring and different and interesting. And we went to goth clubs because there was goth girls, so that was played a lot. So of course, but yeah, I don't think there's stuff that he's done that I don't like, but I appreciate that in a weird of alternative music. Somehow this industrial thing snuck in. Like, how does it sneak in on major like you don't hear this kind of music now? You hear DJs and the DJ music as electronic music, but how the fuck did they sneak in Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails to be a giant $1 million fucking band? It's incredible.
It is.
So yeah, I would say definitely say 9 Inch Nails.
Cool, man. Awesome. Joe, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
this.
man.
Great discussion, great conversation about a lot of stuff. So just hang tight here. I'm going to wrap it up, and then we'll wrap it up after I get it done here. Thank you for listening to the What Lies Ahead podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms. For more information on future episodes, you can go to my Instagram account and follow us at What Lies Ahead _podcast, and on Facebook by searching What Lies Ahead podcast. See you all on the next episode.